Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of Bluegrass. You've enjoyed live Bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite Bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. I'm very happy to welcome Tammy Rogers to Got Grass. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm a longtime fan of yours and your bands, and I'm glad to have you on the show. This is Fiddle Week because tonight, strangely enough, I'm interviewing Richard Green. So,
wow.
Two of my favorite fiddle players on episodes. They won't be on the same time.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I know.
I'm honored that he's amazing, and what a trailblazer. Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun to talk to people of all ages and generations on the podcast, because not a lot of the real early people left. The second generation people, but it's fun fun to catch up with them and get their take.
And they definitely, they carry so much history, just in their life and in their memories, that it's important that stuff be documented, I think, while they're still here, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I know you have a lot of big news about your band, and we'll get to that very soon. But I usually start out with a non-music question, which is, what would a perfect day off be for you?
Oh, man, a perfect day off. Wow. Give me a little bit more parameter. Is it what time of year?
All I ask people is, say, if you don't have your fiddle around, so you're not playing music all day, what would you? I don't know. Anytime, like now. Let's say you had a day off and nothing to do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would probably want to wake up down on Amelia Island, off the coast of Florida, which is outside of Jacksonville. We've got a small little funky beach house down there, and it's not right on the beach. It's about a mile from the water. And I would get my cup of coffee, and I would sit out on my front porch, and I would sit there and talk to my husband and enjoy that morning, and then probably get up and walk to the beach or take the golf cart to the beach and hang out down there for a little bit, go get some brunch, probably come back, hang out with some friends. That sounds pretty good.
It sure does. And I guess you've probably done that before. It sounds like something you like to do. Yeah.
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
That's my in the winter and fall, I love to be up in the mountains, with a fire going, but something about, that beach in the springtime, and just love it. The breeze and the air is wonderful.
Yeah. You're making me want to go.
Yeah, you should. It's awesome.
Can we go back a little bit in time and talk about your upbringing and how music became such a huge part of your, it became your life, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you grew up in a musical family.
Yes.
Which a lot of people did in Bluegrass, I know.
Yeah. It's a communal thing. And I think that still in many cases tends to be kind of the fertile ground, if you will, or the breeding ground for musicians, that when you grow up with it as part of your family profile, it's just almost second nature. I tell people playing music is like breathing to me. I don't have to think much about it. I mean, I don't have to, it's not a struggle, mentally, emotionally, because it's been woven into the very fabric of my life since I was a very small child. And I'm very thankful for that. At the time, I think what happens so often is when you're brought up that way, and that's just part of your family dynamic, you don't think too much about, I've got to get up on stage and play, or I've got to, perform. It's just part of who you are. And there's such a comfort level that comes with that, not to mention, just the hours and hours that you get a chance as a young person to play and have, somebody else. My dad was a guitar player, so as soon as I would learn a fiddle tune, he would be back there, playing the chords behind me and playing the rhythm. So I always had that underlying structure and the harmony and the timing, and those things are so hard to teach. But it wasn't something that I ever had to think a whole lot about, because I was being immersed in it, if you will, without having to go out of my way to find those opportunities, I guess is the best way to describe it.
It's funny because when I have asked people, this I think is my 44th podcast episode since last February. So I always ask the same question: what's a day off? And almost everyone says the day off for me is I get my instrument and I play. I say, I know, but what if you don't have your instrument? But it's like the first love of everybody. That's what they love to do, is play.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And it's funny because for me, and I guess, and part of it is I made that crossing from being, I hate to use the word amateur, but a young person, a student in school and doing those things, to being, a full-fledged professional now, 35, 36 years ago, long, long time ago. So I think for me, because I have the opportunity to play so very often and so very frequently, both in studios and out touring and doing live gigs and sitting in with that person, this person, and all this, that I think sometimes setting the instrument down, and having a day or two where I don't physically pick it up, when I do pick it up again and play, I'm reminded of the joy. And it's not like, oh, this is my job. Then I come back to the joy. And I also, sometimes I think when we play a lot, like a lot of us do that are, fortunate enough to play professionally, I think my hands tend to fall into patterns, just things that feel comfortable, licks, the way my brain pathways work. So I think sometimes when I am able to step away from it and I come back to it, for example, with the Steeldrivers, this is our 20th year anniversary. So we've been playing a lot of these songs for a long time. So it's always, rather refreshing to me when, maybe I haven't played the songs in a week or two, if we've had a break, to come back to them. And it's like, oh, I just played something different on Drinking Dark Whiskey, the song that I've played 10,000 times. So that break, kind of allows me to come back with a fresh perspective, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of questions I've asked people. When you're playing, obviously, an instrument you know very, very well, you played a lot of these songs, as you say, thousands of times. Do you consciously work on playing different solos or fills or things in a song or recording, or do you kind of like to feel comfortable staying with what's in your fingers, as you say? Do you make an effort to try to bust out of
Sometimes.
patterns? Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, a lot of it depends upon the song, to be honest with you. We don't play in the Steeldrivers, like we don't do standards, bluegrass covers or anything. So it's not like, oh, we're gonna toss in, Blue Ridge Cabin Home tonight, and just everybody's gonna take a solo or whatever and toss it around. So a lot of our songs are pretty highly arranged. A lot of our tunes have what we call, hook licks or set melody that really frames the arrangement. So chances are, if you hear me play something like Sticks That Made Thunder, which was on the first record, that da 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 ya da 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 da. that melody, I'm going to play it very, very similarly every time because it's the hook lick of the song. So, in that case, I I would I wouldn't vary. I might in my fills, in my backup, but something, a solo like on um Guitars, Whiskey, Guns and Knives, where it's kind of more of a traditional format. Everybody's taking a solo. If I'm feeling kind of spry or spunky one night, I might, it's like, I'm going to play something really different tonight and rip off on something different. So there are definitely songs in every set that I'll, maybe push myself to play something different for sure.
Do you remember a point in your life when you decided or realized that you were a professional musician? Like, was that a thing that you said, oh my goodness, I actually am, this is my career and my job and my love?
Yes, I remember being about 25 years old, and I had been kind of struggling. I was out of college, and I was doing a lot of freelance work, and just trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. I mean, I've always played music. I mean, I have a degree in music, but I hadn't really thought much beyond how do I make money? How do I get out of school and support myself? How is that going to work? So I was teaching lessons and I was doing a lot of freelance stuff. And, I went and visited a school because I thought, well, maybe I should get into music therapy and do something, with this talent and with this music that really helped people. It just seemed really almost too self-serving because I love music so much. It couldn't possibly be all that I was, what I was meant to do. I kept feeling like, well, I should be doing something to help people. I should be doing something more active, in the world. And I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was playing in a bar, and I was playing a gospel song. And at the end of the night, this couple came up after the show and said, I can't tell you what that meant to me. And it was like a light bulb moment to me, because I finally realized, this isn't just about me. If I can make a difference in somebody's life by performing and by the music that I put out in the world, then that's a service in and of itself. And suddenly I was really okay with pursuing a performing life and being a performer then. And it was like, then the doors started opening, and I think I allowed myself to accept it and be okay with it. And I never looked back after that.
So music didn't have to be like a way to do therapy. It could just be in and itself a gift to people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That must have been quite a aha moment.
It was, and I don't know, I mean, I know a lot of musicians wind up doing a lot of different things in their lives. So, everybody has their own journey and their own, way of going about things. But, it was just, again, maybe because it's always been part of my life and I just took it for granted, that I thought, well, this can't possibly be enough. This can't be what I'm, really supposed to do here. But when I finally realized that it could mean more to other people and not just me, then that was definitely an epiphany.
You were fairly young when you set off with Patty Loveless and Trisha Yearwood playing, country music. What was that like for you? Was that I'm sure it felt like a big break in a sense, right?
Huge. Yeah. I mean, I had grown up playing both bluegrass and classical music in school, and bluegrass at home with the family band. So I'd never really thought about playing electric music or, country music, something more commercial like that. But once I got hired to play with Patty, which was just an amazing thing, and what a gift. She is just one of the greats, and she's from East Kentucky. She was very well steeped in bluegrass, so it was kind of the perfect entry gig for me because she was even doing some Ralph Stanley songs in the set. Our voices blended great. I'm from East Tennessee. I mean, as the crow flies, we're probably about 100 miles apart. So um, it it was awesome, and to be out with, it was just so much fun, and there was so much joy in it, and to finally be able to make that leap from only playing part-time, being able to support myself, to be able to fully support myself doing this crazy thing called music. It was just, an exceptionally fine time. It was amazing.
Yeah. Um, at some point, were you determined to have a solo career or as a band leader or even a solo artist, or were you content at that point to, I know you did some albums on your own, so I'm just getting to like what caused you to kind of go from being a fiddle player with, Patty Loveless to I want to do my own stuff? Or was that always a dream of yours?
Um, again, I think, um, as you progress through your life, I think dreams and goals can change. And I hadn't really thought too much about like a solo thing, growing up, because I was always in a band. It was band thing. Um, but then I guess kind of seeing how the country thing works, where it was more solo artists, um, then it was kind of like, oh, well, that's interesting. And I had been writing songs, since my teenage years. So then kind of understanding, oh, there are people who write songs and make their own records, and do these different things. I think it was just kind of part of my, my education in the music world, that you don't have to be one thing. I didn't have to be just a fiddle player. Didn't have to be just a songwriter. It didn't have to be just a singer. I could kind of weave through and do these different things. And I think that's really more than anything how that came about. Just following interests and going, oh, okay, well, I can write these songs and I can sing them, or I can play these songs and be a part of somebody else's band. It's not all or, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you must have had musical heroes or influences growing up, either on the fiddle or vocally or just in general. Are there one or two you can think of that really like you just fell in love with their music?
Oh my gosh. I've always said this, Emmylou Harris,
Mhm.
she is still kind of the beacon. Just both her voice, the records that she's made through the years, she's allowed her, creative spirit to go in so many different places. And of course, I was kind of a young teenager when she put out, records like Blue Kentucky Girl and the Roses in the Snow album, which were essentially bluegrass records. If you go back and listen to those now, she had Ricky Skaggs and Jerry Douglas and Tony Rice and the Whites, playing and singing on all that stuff. So, I mean, I was just like so captivated by those records. And then, through that, got into all of her whole catalog of stuff. So as an artist, she is the one that I point to. I mean, as a player, as a fiddler, um, believe it or not, I always credit Scotty Stoneman as a huge influence for me. And I feel like Scotty doesn't get, near the acclaim that perhaps he should. But if you go back and listen to, I was very fortunate when I was a young, kind of impressionable teenager, to get my hands on his live record that he did with the Kentucky Colonels with Clarence and Roland White. And that is just phenomenal. I mean, I hear is playing these days, in Jason Carter and Michael Cleveland, just I mean, he would grab handfuls of double stops, and just the tone and the intensity and the drive that he played with. I mean, truly, probably more than anybody, that affected me. And of course, the other big influence that I think just kind of seeped in through osmosis is Daryl Anger. And I think, his influence came through more like the Tony Rice records, and, like Manzanita and some of that kind of stuff that was coming out of California. And he wasn't, strictly a bluegrass player. I mean, he was, he just had a different touch and a different kind of swing to his playing. My husband gave me one of the greatest compliments. We were in between houses, and we were renting this house, and the folks had a pretty fine vinyl connection, and they had the first Tony Rice record, and I put it on the turntable, and we were listening, and my husband said, "Who's that playing fiddle?" And I said, well, "That's Daryl Anger." And he goes, "Wow, he sounds a lot like you." And I was like, well, this record was only like 40 years before now, but thank you. That is a huge compliment. I love that. And of course I shared that with Daryl, because I was thrilled, and he was just the sweetest about it. He was like, "Oh no, I'm the one that's complimented." So yeah, I mean, and those two guys play vastly differently, but again, I would dare say huge influences on me.
What about the fiddle was so attractive, or is so attractive to you? Is there anything? Did you just kind of naturally go to the fiddle? Was it given to you and you just started playing it, or did you, like, how did you get so in love with the fiddle?
Oh, well, that's a funny story, because I initially was not attracted to the fiddle at all. I had been playing some mandolin and some piano, which I know are totally different things. But my dad decided that I was going to play, and he signed me up for, by this point, we had moved out to Texas. So he signed me up for the school orchestra program. And I was really upset. I didn't want to play. I was, kind of huffing around. But we went to the music store, and because we were going to rent one first, and because I was pretty small and wasn't ready for a full size. And the orchestra director had told my dad to get me a viola. They needed violist. So we go to the store. They didn't have any violas in my size. So he went ahead and got me this 3/4 violin, and got the little instructional book. I'll never forget it. Muller Rush, book 1, and came home, and I took out the violin, opened the book to the first page, and started reading and figuring it out. And it was almost love at first sight. There was something about it that, I have this theory after doing a lot of teaching through the years, that if you're musical, there is an instrument that fits you and is your voice. And that's what the violin / fiddle was for me. I never struggled with holding it. I never struggled with the bow, never struggled with the left hand. It just always felt completely natural to me. And again, I've done enough teaching that if it doesn't feel right, most people, I mean, it's just crazy. Your hands are doing two totally different things, and just holding the thing is, uncomfortable and awkward. And, it almost just has to be that natural, your body just naturally does it. So, that's what happened. And I've never looked back. It's my voice.
It's funny you mentioned the viola, and my neighbor plays it in an orchestra, and I guess there's a real shortage of viola players in symphony orchestras these days.
Yeah.
I've never heard one in bluegrass. I don't know why. I mean, there's cello, string bass, fiddle. Viola doesn't seem to have made the transfer to bluegrass. It's a cool instrument. My grandfather played it too, but it's not common like the fiddle at all.
No, but lots of times people will use them when they're recording on records. Ricky Skaggs did, when he would stack some parts, even I think it was back on the 75 New South record, before people were playing 5-string fiddles, he was playing a viola on some of that stuff. And now, a lot of modern players use five strings, which is basically the range of the viola, that low C string, with the on a violin body. So it's definitely, the range is very, very nice in the music. So, but not a lot of people just play viola in a bluegrass band,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. Going back in time, if you could have sat down and played music, just sitting on a couch, for example, with anybody in music history, is there anybody that you feel like you really missed out? You would have loved to just sat and chatted and played music for a couple hours with?
Um, well, Tony Rice for sure. I never got the opportunity to play with them, although I probably would have been so dumbstruck that I don't know if I would have been able to play a note. Um, I just grew up listening to every single thing, buying every single record that he ever put out, I think. Um, and when there's somebody like that just took their instrument to such a high level, and just change the approach and change the way people thought of it in the context of a band and bluegrass and music. It's hard to fathom. It's hard to kind of get over, and in my case, get over my fandom, my fangirl.
Yeah, I hear you.
But
I hear you.
yeah, he's definitely one for sure. Um, yeah, I can.
That's a good answer. He's my favorite too, so I like that answer.
Yeah,
He's
well,
my
it's
favorite
funny. I'm
musician.
just noticing, of course, the Zoom, the podcast, they won't be able to see this, but since we're Zooming, I see your Tony Rice unit poster there on your wall. So yeah.
Yeah, well, when I started doing concerts in 2008, his band was the first band, and they played up here four times over the first
Yeah,
like 4 years. Yeah, it was high point of my life for sure.
I got to see him kind of in the mid '80s at the Down Home, which is a small club up in Johnson City, Tennessee, and it was phenomenal. He was still singing. He was one of my all time favorite bluegrass lead singers. Still
Yeah,
is.
me
I
too.
mean, just where he pocketed his vocal and the way he sang and the songs he chose to sing. I mean, just unbelievable.
I remember reading some quote from Alison Krauss, who said that when she heard his music, she really believed every word was coming from his heart, kind of like, and that's that to me. I love everything about his playing, singing, rhythm, but to me, it's the emotion in his music
Oh, yeah.
that got to me. Still
Yeah.
does. I mean, there are very few people in bluegrass I can listen to the song and actually get tearful, and he's one of the few. And he just
Hmm.
has something about him just brings out emotion. I
Oh,
always
yeah.
thought. Yeah.
I cite, when people ask your desert island discs,
Mhm.
still to this day, and it's 45 years old, Skaggs and Rice is a
Mhm.
perfect album.
Yeah.
I truly think I would put that up with anybody that says any record in any genre is absolutely perfect. That record, I don't think there's a mistake on it. Vocally, instrumentally, it's flawless. It is absolutely flawless. And they recorded it back before you could go and edit everything and tune things and put things on a grid. They just played and sang, and it's perfect.
Right. Right, exactly. Yeah.
And not just from execution, emotionally, like you say, the way they sang the songs, the way, the way they conveyed the song. It's a perfect record.
On your personal playlist, let's say on Spotify or wherever you listen to music, any surprises that would be on there we wouldn't expect to hear on your playlist? Like kinds of music you listen to that say we wouldn't expect.
Let's see. I listen to, believe it or not, I listen to a lot of songwriters. So, I've been a big fan in recent years of Jason Isbell. I think his songwriting um, is pretty hard to beat these days. When he really nails something, it's really, really strong. Um, I'm trying to think of something else that might surprise you that I would listen to. Um, I mean, kind of growing up a child of the 80s, I love you too. So I might have some 80s rock and roll in there to listen to. Um, I might have, this is a guilty pleasure of mine, if I'm cooking dinner and I'm just chilling out, probably 90% of the time, I'll put on Miles Davis Kind of Blue. There's just something about that music, that instrumental, just the vibiness of it that I love. So that's probably out of left field.
Well, I don't know. I grew up listening to jazz, not bluegrass, and I find bluegrass and jazz very similar in lots of ways.
Oh
And I
yeah,
think a lot of bluegrass musicians have listened to or love to listen to and play jazz too.
for
There's so
sure.
much overlap there,
Hmm.
which I always thought was kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, it's the improv nature of, you know, and the instrumental prowess of the music. I mean, it's rare that you would go to, say, even a country concert and hear instrumentals in the set, or go to a rock concert and suddenly they play a couple instrumentals. It doesn't usually translate that way. So I think those are, besides classical music, those are the two big music styles that feature a lot of instrumental playing, and a lot of it is improvisational. So yeah, those connections have always made perfect sense to me.
Unfortunately, classical music used to have huge improvisational parts, you
Yes.
know, and that's kind of gone by the wayside now, where the pianist and the concerto would just, okay, you
Hmm.
got 5 minutes, go.
Just
You know,
go. Yeah. Yeah. And
that's a
even
fun. That's
even during the Baroque era, there was a lot of improvisation. Bach would write out the bass. They called it figured bass, and it wasn't written out. He would just write numbers and then kind of leave it to either the cellist or the keyboard player to just kind of fill in how they saw fit. So yeah, that's, I mean, there are some people that are trying to bring that back, which I would love to see in classical music, because I think it's definitely um, brings spontaneity and freshness into the music, and for the performers makes it super fun.
I used to listen to Keith Jarrett a lot. He was a player who
Yeah.
had the classical training, but he would just do a whole hour and a half concert completely improvised. It's like, oh
Hmm.
my God.
Yeah.
No, sometimes it would work. Sometimes it got a little boring and long, but when it worked, it was incomparable, I thought.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I mean,
Um,
you're totally dependent upon, kind of where you are in that moment. I mean, if you're feeling good, and I mean, I know for me personally, it's hard to describe, but some nights I'm just more, there's more sparks going off than others. And I'll just really be in the moment more. And sometimes I can't even tell you why that is, if it's feeding off my other fellow musicians, or if I just slept good the night before. I don't know, or if
mm,
I do know lots of times if I'm in a situation, whether it's in a hall or theater, that where I can really hear very well, that that helps me be more in the moment too. If I'm struggling, because of the sound system or the noise of the crowd or whatever, to really hear, I think it it impedes my performance somewhat.
makes sense. I want to talk about a little bit about playing the fiddle. So, could you briefly define the difference between playing country music fiddle, and bluegrass fiddle? Um, Obviously, the genres are different, but when you're playing fiddle with a country band versus a bluegrass band, what is the approach different? Are you thinking differently, or are you just trying to fit in?
Yes.
You're thinking differently.
No, I approach them very, very differently. And I learned this, the hard way, being hired to play country music and not knowing what the heck I was doing. And I had not, it hadn't been pointed out to me, um, the very real differences in how the instrument is used and the approach. And I know I got busted a good bit early on for overplay, because in country music, typically an instrument like the fiddle doesn't play from the downbeat all the way through the song to the end. you pick your spots and you play in those spots, and the rest of the time you don't keep playing just out of the microphone. You just lay out. You stand there and hold your fiddle. But in bluegrass, and I think the biggest reason is because, in bluegrass, you don't typically have drums and keyboards and things that take up a lot of sonic space. You have 4, 5, 6 instruments, acoustic instruments that are all, working together to create this overall sound. So it's almost like layers of sound. If the banjo is doing the fills in a verse, I'm still playing something to support him, but I'm still making some sound, whether I'm chopping or, droning or just trying to support whatever he's doing, support the chords. But in country, if a steel guitar is filling in the chorus, chances are I'm not going to play because he's taking up all that sonic room. And usually it's not, unless I'm going to play a line with that instrument that we work out beforehand, I'm going to let them have it, let them have that space. So if you listen to a country record, usually you've got your rhythm instruments, your drums, bass, acoustic guitar doing a very, simple rhythm pattern, maybe electric doing some diamonds, and one instrument filling those holes. There's not like 3 or 4 doing different things in the background. So that's the biggest difference to me.
For someone learning to play bluegrass fiddle, what would be your biggest tip?
Oh, listen to records and play along with records. Go to concerts and watch what the fiddle player does. So much of it is about paying attention to the little details. I mean, there's nothing that can really take the place of playing with other people. So, if you can find a weekly jam session or invite some friends over that play or are wanting to play, all those sorts of things go such a long ways towards it. I know that wasn't one answer, but
yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I see fiddle players that can play the fiddle, but the transition from just playing melody and stuff on the fiddle to playing bluegrass is tricky.
mm-hmm.
Because bluegrass is so, like you said, there's so much more going on there, fills and chops and this and that, all the stuff that adds to the rhythm and the whole mood and drive of the song. I guess a good teacher would be a good help too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, so much of it, like you say, is paying attention and watching and observing and really noticing, okay, what's the fiddle doing at this point in the song? And, so often, unless it's an instrumental, it's paying attention to the song and to the arrangement of the song. And that's hard, when you're trying to make a transition from either playing fiddle tunes or playing classical or something like that to suddenly, oh, you mean I have to listen to the words now? It's how all the different pieces work together. But yeah, you do have to listen to the words.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge for you in fiddle playing? I asked this question of Michael Cleveland, who was on the podcast, and he said, my biggest challenge is playing in tune. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, I still struggle with that all the time, especially double stops and slides and stuff. I really struggle playing in tune.
Yeah, no, I think if any fiddle player is being honest, they would agree with that. It's something, it's inherent in the instrument because no frets, of course, and you can't ever let go of that. You can't ever not listen. You can't ever not be making those super fast minor adjustments. It's just all consuming. And anybody that tells you that they don't listen that closely, or they don't, they're not trying to always be working on their intonation, either they're not, they must not be very advanced musically, or they're lying to themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Because once you start listening that closely, you can never not listen like that again. And I've often quoted, Itzhak Perlman, who's, been considered the greatest violinist of his generation for the past 50 or 60 years. I can guarantee you he never stops listening either. And he's probably been playing now, 60, 70 years, his whole life. You just, it's not something that ever is automatic. So,
I guess,
yeah.
it makes sense. I mean, like you say, no frets, an instrument that's probably old and moves with humidity and temperature.
Yes.
Your
My
fingers are
gosh.
different. Everything is different. The bow. So you're constantly adjusting, micro adjusting as you go, right? As you play along,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. All the time. All the time. And so often, I know I started picking up on this in the studio, I've done so much studio work that, you're playing with fretted instruments, banjo, mandolin, guitar, and it's always the fretless instrument that if somebody sounds out of tune because they can't change their note, we have to adjust to match them. Ah! So
it's always the fiddle, right?
Ask Jerry Douglas that question. He plays a fretless instrument. He'll agree. I mean, it's always those fretless instruments that, because a mandolin player or banjo, they're not going to be able to change that note, but we can.
Right. Good point. So as you've gotten older in your career and more experienced and moved on, has your approach to playing the fiddle changed? I asked this question of lots of people. I asked Todd Phillips, who had a good answer. He said, when I look back at my old records, I like to play a lot less notes now, and I like to play the right notes. He said, which I thought was a cute way of describing it. But has your approach to fiddle changed as you've matured, and or you still think you play the same as you did?
No, I think it's definitely matured, and I think most of us that have played for a really, really long time, would have a similar response to Todd's. It's, I think, when you're young, I think we're so fascinated by the thrill and the speed. Oh, I can play all these notes and I can do all this really fast stuff, and it's flashy and it's fun. But I think as we get more experience and play lots of different songs and styles and music, then suddenly, things kind of start getting boiled down, and I'm sure I don't play as many notes as I used to, and I'm sure I don't try to do as many fancy licks or whatever, but I'm trying to play what's right for the song. And I think that is more my overarching thought is what is right for the song that I'm playing. And maybe it is playing a lot of notes. If it's that type of tune, then I'm going to give it my best shot. But if it's something that doesn't need that, or just needs a beautiful, pure melody, then that's what I'm going to go for. And I'm going to try to play it, with the most beautiful tone and perfectly in tune and perfectly in time. And it may look on paper, to be a very simple part, but it's how it's delivered. And, that's, I guess, what's more important to me these days than anything is trying to play the perfect part.
Yeah. I asked Larry Sparks this question. He says, when I play a solo, I'm trying to play the words. I'm trying to play the lyric of the song.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it.
Well,
so let's talk. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, in the end, when you are soloing, the thing that sets songs apart is the melody.
Right.
So if you can actually hear that melody in a solo, then you're playing the right part.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the Steeldrivers. You guys have a big milestone event coming up, and I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, 20th anniversary. It's a big year for us. I dare say, if you had asked any of us 10 or 15 years ago, would we still be around to celebrate 20 years? We would have said, "What the heck are you talking about?" But amazingly enough, we are, and we just felt like it was something to celebrate, and um, we're having a good time. I mean, we've got some great shows, lined up for this year. Some of our favorite venues, and playing multiple nights in certain venues, and we love doing that, and just feels like a good thing to do.
It's pretty amazing, actually, when you think about it. 20
Mhm.
years.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
few people have the same job for 20 years or the same whatever for 20 years. So it's pretty cool.
yeah. And as most people know, we have had band changes throughout those 20 years, and interestingly enough, um, it's with the exception of one mandolin change. When Mike Henderson stepped away and Brent Truitt stepped in, all the only other band changes we've had have been the lead singer. So it's crazy to think that we've been able to continue and have the success that we've had through now. We have our fourth lead singer, and if you'd asked me again 15 years ago if we would have been able to withstand those changes and come out on the other end arguably more successful than ever, I would have said not a chance. But somehow, we've been able to um, keep going and consistently have great singers, not just good singers, but all four of these guys have been world class singers, and and keep creating records and songs that um keep us all inspired and motivated to keep doing this.
When you started that band, was there a particular style or vision that you had? Like, we're going to do original stuff, or we're going to be a hard driving band. Was there any kind of, how did you decide how to be as a band, I guess would be my question, when you started, if you remember that 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
actually, it wasn't really a conscious decision on my part. I got the call to get together Mike Henderson, who I mentioned earlier, the original mandolin player. We like to call him, the architect of the band, because he's the guy that made the calls and invited everybody. So it's kind of like he handpicked the people that he wanted in this band. He and Chris Stapleton, had been writing songs at that point 3 or 4 years together. So, as he liked to say, he had all these songs, all these good songs sitting around doing nothing, going to waste. So I think it was kind of his vision to get a group together that would maybe just play locally once a week or once a month, just kind of for fun, to do these songs, have an outlet for these songs that they've been writing. Um, so Mike and I had worked together in the mid '90s with the Dead Reckoning record label. That may have been what you were referencing when you asked me about doing solo stuff. I put out 3 records with them.
right. Yep.
And Mike put out a couple solo records. Um, he had been college roommates with Mike Fleming, bass player, and then he had known Richard Bailey, I think, from hanging out at Station Inn and playing with the Tennessee Jug Band and stuff like that. Unbeknownst to me, I don't know that I realized that Richard was going to be there. Richard and I grew up kind of playing the same bluegrass circuit out in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. He was with the band called the Tennessee Gentlemen for many years. And so I remember, he likes to joke that he's known me since before I could drive. And it's really the truth. I think I was 14 or 15 when I first met Richard, and he was probably 17 or 18. Um, so, at that point, I'd heard Chris's name tossed about town, but I hadn't met him, certainly hadn't heard him sing, and I didn't know Mike Fleming. So I showed up that first night at Mike Henderson's house, and we started playing. And of course, when you hear Stapleton's voice, you immediately know that this is something unique and a voice to be reckoned with. And, it very quickly became something that we all wanted to do. And we had, just by the sheer force that we were all allowed to kind of be ourselves and not try to sound like anybody else, it created this really unique sound. And I don't know if Mike Henderson had really thought it through to that extent to realize how unique it would be, but boy, it sure worked just almost from the beginning to have this really undeniable kind of sound. I mean, I would have never thought, if you'd played a voice like Chris's to me and said, okay, you're going to sing harmony with this person and it's going to really be this thing, I would have said, no, my voice won't sound good with that kind of voice, because my voice is not husky and raspy and bluesy like that at all. But it was almost something magical that happened. It's like my voice kind of put the edge on top of Chris's thicker, rougher, raspier voice, if that makes any sense. It wasn't the same style of voice. It was very complimentary.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. I get it. So when Chris Stapleton left the Steeldrivers, were you tempted to go with him, or did he ask you to leave with him and go be a country singer? Or what was the mood I mean, it must have been a huge thing, because his voice had become like, and your harmony, the signature kind of sound of the band. And then he left. It's like, oh my God, what are they going to do now?
Yeah. Well,
what was your feeling about that?
Oh, I was devastated. Absolutely devastated. I mean, I honestly didn't think that we would be able to survive, that loss. But, initially he wasn't really planning on becoming a country superstar. I don't think he had any idea that his life would take that turn. Mm-hmm. He was writing a lot in Nashville and was starting to have a lot of success as a songwriter. I think by the time he left, he already had a couple #1 records as a songwriter. And certainly a lot of people were approaching him about doing a solo record at that point, but he wasn't signed to a record label. He wasn't ready to make that leap. It was just, kind of a parting of ways at that point. And so no, it wasn't like, hey, Tammy, let's go on and go do country music together. That wasn't, no. An offer there. And even then I knew he had married Morgan, and she's a phenomenal singer, his wife, and sings with him. And that, when that all kind of came together, then it was like, as it should be, it made perfect sense. We were fortunate that we found Gary Nichols, who came into the band, and Gary had a similar quality to Chris, kind of that soulful, raspy, bluesy voice. But he never tried to copy Chris. And I think that's been the secret to the success is, we've never asked somebody to copy those records. We've just been lucky enough to find people who have a similar quality and then just let them sing it with their emotion and with their take on the songs. So I think then when people come to see the band, it's still really authentic, because it's not like we're looking for an impersonator. We just happened to find a couple more guys that were incredible singers. So.
Yes, you did. Thinking about the history of women in bluegrass, I had the opportunity to speak with Alice Gerard. She was talking about her days with Hazel Dickens and these Dickens parties they would have back in Baltimore in the 60s, where Bill Monroe would show up and the Stanley Brothers would show up and all these people would show up and they'd sit around and eat and play music. I guess, and it seems like women have become a much more established part of the kind of the stardom of bluegrass than they were back then. I mean, I guess it's changed a lot. It was pretty much a man-dominated industry from what I understand back then, people I've talked to.
Oh
I don't know. Do
yeah.
you have
No,
any views on that? The
I
evolution of
I think
women in
it's
bluegrass?
yeah. No, obviously because I've been doing this a really long time now. Um so it's been awesome to see women eh, not only kind of run their own band, but situations like the one I'm in where I'm I'm an equal part of the band. So it's not, I mean, not to discount something like um where the girl is the front person and builds a band around that. But when you have a band of mixed, one or two girls, couple guys, and it's equal. I love seeing that because, then it's not okay. Well, this woman wanted to have a bluegrass band, so she went out and hired these guys to back her up. And there's nothing wrong with that either, but it just shows the evolution, of women both being great players, not only singers, but also being recognized as, I love seeing Kristen Scott Benson with the Grascals, because it wasn't her band to hire the people around her. She was hired in to be the banjo player, and she kills it as she should, and as she is. So, but it's still, a very male dominated music. I mean, I don't think about it one way or the other because I've just always grown up being the only girl in the band historically. Um, but we played a festival a number of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and it was pretty traditional festival. And I didn't notice, I didn't think about it, but on the drive home the next day, our bass player Mike said, "Did you realize that you were the only woman on that stage all day yesterday?" And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Yep." And I was like, "Wow, no, I didn't." I'm thankful for the opportunity, but it kind of made me a little sad that for whatever reason there weren't more bands booked that day that had women in them or running them or whatever. Um, but it hadn't been easy. It hadn't been easy. And I'm
Yeah,
sure in a lot of ways it's still not.
I was talking to Missy Raines about this, and she said when she was first playing in bands as a bass player in the South, and she would sometimes go to the promoter after the show and to get paid, and they would say, "No, we're going to pay someone who's in the band." She said, "Well, I am in the band. I'm the bass player." They just assumed that she was just, you know, I don't know,
Right.
not
Yeah.
couldn't give her the money because she was a woman.
Uh yeah.
Yeah.
It's maddening, and all of us that have been doing this um for a long time, like Missy and myself and Allison Brown and kind of our generation of women, certainly we've had to put up with a lot of that and the attitudes of, growing up. Well, you're pretty good for a girl, all that stuff. And, I can just remember gritting my teeth and saying to myself, if I can't be as good as any man, then I'm not doing this. And, that was my driving, which, again, I think stood me well because um I don't think I've ever gotten a job just because I was the token female.
That male attitude is still prevalent in lots of the bluegrass world today? Like, yeah, you're pretty good for a woman kind of thing? Or do you think most people have kind of grown up? I don't know.
I think that type of attitude isn't as common for sure. No, I think we've kind of moved past that some. But you know, number wise, there's still a disparity, between the number of men that are out touring and playing versus the number of women that are doing that. But I'm heartened to see, bands like Molly Tuttle. She's got Bronwyn and Shelby out playing with her. So the guys are outnumbered. She's got, including her, 3 girls and 2 guys. And they kill it.
They're
I mean,
amazing.
If you closed your eyes, you would have you wouldn't be able to tell who was a guy and who was a gal. They're just all phenomenal musicians.
Yeah, they are. Did you ever have a time in your life where you were discouraged in the music business enough to consider maybe doing something else? Or were you, I'm sure you've had ups and downs like everybody else, but did you ever get to the point where you said, I'm going to go try to be a teacher or do something that's not a bluegrass performer?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think for a number of years I've been able to, I look at it as one big umbrella, when you're a musician. So I don't think there's ever been a time that I haven't had 2 or 3 different plates spinning at once. Living in Nashville, it's afforded me that opportunity. So even though I've been doing the Steeldrivers for 20 years, I've always kept doing recording sessions for other people. I've got a couple tracks I've got to go play on this afternoon. I write songs. I had a publishing deal for a long time. So that was another musical outlet. I did teach at Belmont University as an adjunct for about 15 years, it seemed like it was about 2003, 2004, somewhere in there, till 2018, so a couple days a week I was over doing that. So I've always managed to do 3 or 4 different things, but I just look at it all under the umbrella of music. So, and I like that. Every year is different. Every year, the percentages of, okay, well, this year I made most of my money from touring, or this year I made most of my money from recording, or this year I taught more, or whatever, it all just kind of seems to roll into one big happy musical life.
That seems like a good place to end this conversation. How can you improve on that? I was just going to ask you quickly. So when, in your ideal performing situation, would you rather just sit on a couch with somebody and play duo, or do you prefer like band and festival, the whole like excitement of a big performance? In your deep down in your heart, if you had your druthers, would you just like to sit on the couch and play a duet with someone? Or that's hard. Not really a fair question. I guess they're so different, but
yeah. Well, because I do enjoy, the support of like a 5 or 6 piece band dynamic. I get so much inspiration from, my fellow players, but I also love the simplicity of just sitting there. I have had the opportunity to do a number of gigs with Emmylou, and there've been times when she said, "Hey, let's get together and run these songs," and it's just me and her. And what's not to love about that? That's phenomenal. That's incredible.
Yeah.
To just hear 2 voices, two instruments, it's great. But I'd say 9 times out of 10, I really, really love playing in a band. So, if you could have plopped me down in, say, maybe the Bluegrass album band with Jerry, but Doyle would have to let me sing tenor, because I would really want to sing tenor with Tony. But to play in that band with Todd playing bass and all the rhythm going on with the way Tony played rhythm, and JD, his timing, that I can't imagine anything being more exciting than that.
Is there anybody today that you've heard that you'd love to maybe do a duo with, sing with? Not in your band, but like people out there in the music world that I asked this of Rhonda Vincent. She said, "Oh, I'd love to sing with James Taylor." She said. I said, "Okay, that would be nice." Anybody on your bucket list you'd love to just be able to sing with?
That I would love to sing with.
You haven't had a chance
Um,
to yet.
that I haven't had a chance to sing with. Let's see. I finally got to sing with Ricky Skaggs a number of years ago down at the Station Inn, and that was really awesome. Because again, I grew up with that voice. Um, believe it or not, there's this young kid, Zach Top, that
Oh, I'm hearing a lot about him from various people. Yeah,
yeah,
Zach Top. Yeah.
and he's interesting to me. I mean, he's fantastic, but he grew up playing bluegrass. But now he's having, he's a huge fan of classic country as well, and he's Keith Whitley, he keeps saying over and over, is his favorite singer, who was also one of my absolute favorites too. I was fortunate enough to see Keith with Ralph a couple times, and just unbelievable singer. Um, so that would be interesting to get to do some singing and playing with him at some point, because he could turn around and rip off the greatest bluegrass thing, and then turn around and sing a classic country, which I love both things. So that'd be super fun.
Hearing his name a lot lately. It's funny.
Yeah,
Since I first heard of him, I've like four people have mentioned how great he is, and I said, "Oh yeah, I know about this guy now.
yeah.
He's
Well, and
cool."
he's kind of keeping his bluegrass creds going too. I think he's got an EP coming out with Billy Strings. So I'm anxious
Yeah.
to hear what that's all about. I'm a huge Billy Strings fan. He'd be another one I
Yeah.
have not, played with, that'd be fun to, because he has such respect for the traditions, but he's just doing some great things. He'd be fun to sit in with too.
Um, if you were me, who would you have on this podcast next? I never asked this question before, but I'm just curious to know who I'm missing. Somebody, Mason Vaez, another young guy that was suggested. I had on the podcast a few weeks ago. So there's people I don't know about. I mean, I know a lot of the older stars, and yet I've had some of them
Hmm.
on, but like, who am I missing out on here in your view that I should have on, young or whatever, that's maybe not, I mean, Zach Top, but I'm sure he's hard to get a hold
Yeah,
of.
yeah. Well, I mean, do you know Bronwyn?
Oh yeah, she's actually been on twice. She was my first
Okay, good.
guest. She was my first
Wow.
guest.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I had her on a year later, kind of just to catch up because she had been married and all this stuff had happened to her
Oh
in that
yeah,
year. So
Jason.
I love
Yeah.
Bronwyn. She used to play up here with a mile 12 back
Oh,
before
okay,
she.
cool.
Yeah, so I got
Yeah,
to know her.
she really seems like things are poised to kind of, take off for her.
Yeah.
Have you done anything with Sharon Gilchrist?
No, that's a good idea because I always like people that have played with Tony Rice because I'm always pursuing those interesting stories
Oh
about
yeah.
that.
Well, and
That's a good one. Yeah.
Sharon does so much behind the scenes. She was really involved in this new, John Hartford tribute record that's coming out. Um, so she would be fantastic, and
That's a good one. Thank you.
she's so
That's
well
exactly what I
versed.
needed. Yeah, that's what
Good.
I
Yeah.
needed.
No, I love
Yeah,
her, and she's got great Tony Rice stories, of course, too. So.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm going to wind this down. I'm going to leave it up to you to put the final 2 cents in. I know you mentioned your Steeldrivers record and tour. You want to just say something else about that, the album, or anything else?
Yeah, yeah, the album. We're super excited. The first single is out. The second single comes out April 11th, and the whole record. Um, I think there'll be a third single at some point, either late April or early May, and the whole record comes out May 23rd. And we're unbelievably excited about it coming out on the iconic Sun Records label. So label mates now with Elvis Presley. That's pretty rocking. So we're excited
Perfect.
about that. I know, right? So we hadn't really planned on having a new record concurrent with this 20th anniversary tour, but when they approached us last year, it seemed like just perfect timing to get that going, and I'm super excited about it. I love the songs that we recorded. I wrote a bunch of them, but we also went back, and Mike Henderson, I don't think I mentioned, we lost him about a year and a half ago. he passed away suddenly. And so to kind of honor him with this 20th anniversary tour, we recorded a couple of his songs on the new record, just, again, just to honor his contribution and space in the band and you know, all that we love and honored about him. So
Yeah, big shoes there.
yes, very,
Definitely.
very. So yeah, I think that's it. I mean, everybody else is doing good and we're excited. Got a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of great shows lined up. So it should be a fun year. Ask me how I'm feeling in November when I get through it all.
I'll shoot you an email in November and
There you go.
see how things are going. I'm sure they'll be going fine.
Be
Anyway, well,
exhausted.
Tammy Rogers, thank you so much for being on here. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. A lot of things I didn't get to. I want to talk more about your songwriting, but I don't want to go on forever here. I think we covered a lot of interesting ground.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime.
It was fun. That would be great. And I hope to meet you in person sometime. Could happen.
Yes. Yeah, we get up that way every now and again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, thanks again and have a great rest of your day and good luck with
Chris,
the tour.
you too.
Okay.
All right. Thank
Take care.
you. Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed our podcast and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.